How's everybody doing there? Welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We probably got about 15 viewers here. It was close a window. All right, cool. So into the curriculum. We're going to be talking about safety. That's obviously important. We're going to be talking about selecting firearms. That really is the most important thing that we're going to be talking about today. Really is selecting the firearm that's right for you. We're going to go through the presentation. I'm going to add in my own nuggets of knowledge along the way, and at the end I'm going to kind of give you a summary of everything that I've come across as far as selecting the right firearm. So getting into it, we're going to talk about the safety rules, how to clear a handgun. Can everyone see the pointer on the screen? I want to make sure you guys can see the pointer, because as we get into some of these pictures, I want to make sure that I be able to point out certain things for you guys. So we're going to be talking about the universal safety rules. We're going to be talking about how to clear a handgun, how to make sure that it's not loaded. We're going to talk about the action of the firearm, the moving parts. We're going to talk about revolvers. We're going to be spending most of our time talking about semi-automatic handguns, which I definitely do prefer for defensive purposes. How to figure out what's right for you based upon size, weight, caliber, that sort of thing. We're going to be talking about ammunition, full metal jacket, jacketed hollow point, how to select the right ammunition for your firearm. We're going to be talking about malfunctions, how to clear those malfunctions, both on the range as well as in a defensive situation. And those methods are going to vary a little bit. And we're going to spend some time, not too much time, we're going to be focusing mostly on handguns, but we are definitely also going to talk about long guns such as the AR15 and the shotgun as well. And we'll talk about other use of force options. And what I mean by other use of force options is, the man who only has a hammer looks at every problem as a nail. Not every single use of force situation requires the use of deadly force, right? So we'll talk about some of the other options you might consider to carry on in your person or even to have in your home. Before we get into the safety rules, and we're going to talk about 4 of them, I think it's important that we understand that safety is a concept. And what I mean is it's a mindset. Because we can go through all these different safety rules, and indeed we're going to, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. Just don't do anything that you feel is unsafe. If there's anything that makes you stop and pause, like, hey, I'm not sure I should be doing this, or hey, I'm not sure they should be doing this, that's good. That's your spidey sense telling you that something might be wrong. So getting into the safety rules, first is we want to treat all guns as if they are loaded. Even if we think they're unloaded, we want to treat the firearm as if it is loaded. The most dangerous firearm, the most dangerous gun, is an unloaded gun. And what I mean is, if you have a firearm that you think is unloaded but you haven't verified and checked to be unloaded, bad things can happen. Famous last words, oh my God, I thought it was unloaded, right? So we want to make sure that the firearm is always unloaded, and we don't want to assume. So most firearm accidents occur when the user swore that the gun was unloaded. So never grow careless or complacent with a firearm. Every single time you pick up the firearm, you're going to perform a proper clearance procedure. We're going to show you how to do that. And also, it's important to educate the people in your household. Little kids, you're going to teach them stop, don't touch, come, run, and tell an adult. But as they get older, in their teens perhaps, whatever you decide based on their maturity level, you might start teaching them how to actually clear a firearm. A spouse, a partner, that sort of thing is important, that if you're going to have guns in the household, that they know how to ensure that they're clear as well. And we're going to show you how to do that. You want to treat any firearm, whether you believe it to be unloaded, you want to treat it as if it's loaded with that same level of respect. So that's the first rule. Treat all guns as if they are always loaded. Also, very important is never point the firearm at anything you aren't willing to destroy. What we mean by destroy is obviously as the bullet exits the muzzle, whatever it impacts is going to damage. If it impacts a person, it's going to damage that person. If it impacts property, you may be responsible for repairing that property. So never ever point the tip, the muzzle of the firearm at anything that you're not willing to destroy. If you think about the muzzle of the firearm, and I have an inert pistol here. This is a SIRT pistol, dummy magazine, dummy pistol. All it does is it shoots lasers. Slide doesn't work. It's not going to take any rounds. This is a great training tool. But if we talk about the muzzle having a laser beam, which of course this one does because it's a laser pistol, you think about a lightsaber exiting that muzzle, you wouldn't point that lightsaber at anything you don't want to destroy. And if you think about that laser beam, that lightsaber exiting the muzzle, you wouldn't point that light beam or that lightsaber at anything that you don't want to destroy. So just kind of think about that. That's what we call muzzle awareness, always being aware of where your muzzle is pointing. That's incredibly important because let's say the gun is loaded, and let's say you do press the trigger. If it's pointing in a generally safe direction, you're not going to injure anyone. Your walls are not going to stop a round. We're going to talk about how many sheets of drywall it takes to stop a bullet. Your walls are not going to stop a round. Your floor, unless it's, you know, I'm in the basement, so I've got a concrete floor, that would be the most safe direction, right? The walls are concrete, but your walls are not going to stop a round. That generally safe direction is going to be dictated by where you're at. It's up to you to decide what is the safest direction. It may be straight up in the air if you're outside. It may be at the ground if you're outside. If you're at the range, obviously it's straight down range. But in a defensive situation, 360 degrees, it's going to be up for you to decide what is the safest direction. You don't want to be pointing that firearm at any innocent bystanders or witnesses. That's not going to help your case when the police start asking questions. And you want to keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. We look in this picture, this police officer has a straight finger up above that trigger guard. So again, if we look at this, this pistol here, this again, laser pistol, not a real pistol, don't ban us Facebook. You can see how my finger, my trigger finger is up and above that trigger guard. I don't have that trigger finger down here like this, okay? The reason being, the reason you want to keep that trigger finger off of the trigger and not on the trigger is in a self-defense situation. If you're startled, for example, or you're pushed, you can flinch and you can press that trigger. So obviously that's going to be a bad day for anyone that might be in front of that muzzle. So we don't want to have any negligent discharges. So we keep the gun unloaded until we're ready to use, verify it's unloaded. The firearm on my hip is in use, ready to use. Of course, I keep it loaded. If we then don't point the firearm at anything we're not willing to destroy, and then if we keep our finger off the trigger, the gun cannot go bang if you don't touch the trigger. So you've got to screw up three things to have what we call a negligent discharge. And a negligent discharge is basically the firearm goes bang when you don't want it to. That oversimplifies the definition, but that's basically what it is. The gun goes bang when you don't want it to, and that's a very bad day. So keep it unloaded, keep your finger off the trigger, and don't point it at anything you don't want to destroy. And then we come into our fourth rule, which is also important. Always be aware of your target and what's beyond. In a defensive situation, home defense, for example, you see it all the time on the internet where somebody will say something stupid like, yeah, I'm just going to shoot at the shadow in the dark. That shadow might be your kid. That shadow might be your wife. That shadow might be your drunk neighbor who thinks it's his house. You've got to always be aware of what your target is. No guesses, 100% certainty. If you're not 100% certain of what that target is, you don't take the shot. I mean, that's true of hunting as well. You wouldn't take a shot at something you think might be a deer. It might be a hunter, right? It might be a hunter's dog. It might be game that you're not licensed to take. So think about it like that. And you want to be aware of what's beyond your target. And what I mean is you might be justified in shooting at the person who's attacking you, right? Let's just assume for conversation that you are justified in shooting that person. But if you miss and you hit little Susie's skip rope behind them, you're going to be liable. If you hit the car behind them, you're going to be liable. If that round goes through a house behind them, you're going to be liable. So just keep that in mind. You know, you are liable, you are responsible for every round that exits the muzzle of your firearm. So be aware of your target and what's beyond your target. Any questions about the safety rules, just drop them in the chat. We're going to talk about how to clear a semi-automatic. Very simple. So again, inert pistol. I'm not going to be able to show you all the steps, but first we're going to drop the magazine. I've got the magazine released right here. First I drop the magazine. Then I would rack that slide. 1, 2, 3. I like to rack it a couple times. 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is even better. I'm going to lock it to the rear when I rack it. I'm going to look inside, make sure there's no magazine. I know I already removed it, but let's double check. And then I'm going to look in the chamber and make sure there's no round, that my extractor didn't somehow break, and that there's no round in that chamber. Okay, so drop the magazine, rack it, and then you're gonna visually and physically. So you want to stick your little pinky in there and just feel, and that's a good habit to get into. You want to build that muscle memory of physically checking, even if you see there's no round because there's great light. At the nighttime, let's say this happens at night, and you're not sure and you want to clear it and it's low light situation, you just want to have that muscle memory so you're just used to it. You look and you feel. You look and you feel. So you're going to visually inspect and then physically verify. And if we look here, you can see at the pointer here, he's looking straight down. He's looking straight through. You see the light coming through. So he's got it locked to the rear, and then he's going to look, make sure there's no magazine. He's going to look at the chamber, and he's going to make sure that there's no round. Steve wants to know why rack it 3 times. It's like I said, 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is even better. It doesn't take any time, right, to go 1, 2, 3. It's that fast. You can do it once and you can look inside. It's just a level of redundancy, boots and suspenders, just to make sure it's out of there. We're not talking about a life and death situation here. You wouldn't be clearing your firearm in a life and death situation. So you have all the time in the world to make sure that it is a safe firearm. And when you're clearing your firearm, you're making sure that it is a safe firearm. So you might as well just take the extra half a second to give it a couple extra racks. If you don't want to, no big deal. That's my personal preference. But ultimately, you know, like I said, it doesn't take any extra time to give it those extra 2 racks. When you set the firearm down, by the way, you always want to set it down with the chamber side slide locked back and the chamber side facing up. So anyone that walks by sees that it's a clear firearm. Clearing a revolver is even easier because all you have to do is open up and look inside. You're going to hit the cylinder release and you're going to peek through those cylinders. In this case, what do we got? 5 chambers in the cylinder. We can see daylight through all 5 and we know that it's clear. Thanks, Dot, but it's not my Glock. Actually, I think that was an XD in the last picture. Let's see. That's a Springfield, not a Glock, but I'll let Gas and Glock know you like it. Defining a gun's action. We've got to understand that there's different types of actions, and basically we're talking about the moving internal parts of the firearm. You've got what we call a single action. That means that the trigger is going to perform a single action when we press it, just going to go bang. You've got to manually cock that hammer for a single action. We've got a double action or double action only. A double action only is going to be a longer, heavier trigger press. If it has an internal hammer, it's going to cock the hammer and drop the hammer. So that's the single action, the double action. You've got combinations thereof, the DASA, and you've got striker fire. We're going to talk about all of those so that you can kind of get a feeling about what is the best firearm for yourself. If we look here at double action, you see that the trigger is all the way forward. Okay, that gives you that longer, more deliberate, heavier trigger press. A lot of people might like that in a defensive firearm because for them they equate that to an added level of safety. It's a more deliberate trigger press. But what we said was keep the finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. You shouldn't rely on the trigger as a safety mechanism. I've got nothing against double action triggers, but if you are choosing a double action trigger because it's more safe, you're doing yourself a disservice. This is your safety. This is the only safety that counts. You know, firearms have some manual safeties, internal safeties, but your trigger finger is the only safety that counts. So we've got the double action, and again, it's all the way forward. You can see here it's all the way forward, and you can see here that the hammer is forward. When we look at single action, you can see down here that the hammer is further back. So there's less distance that you have to press that trigger, less distance for it to travel, less disturbance, human interference when you're pressing the trigger. You're going to have a more accurate shot. You can see here that the hammer is back in a single action only. This happens to be this firearm here that they're showing in the pictures, a SIG 229. This is a double action, single action, sometimes called a traditional double action. I'm not a fan personally of DASA. I either want SA or DA. I like muscle memory, I like consistency. And we're going to see further on in the presentation that when you have that inconsistent trigger press, it creates inaccuracy issues. You know, again, knowing that I'm responsible for every round that exits my muzzle, I want to hit my target. I don't want to have misses due to, you know, like I said, the inconsistency. So that's just personal preference, something that you might want to consider. So revolvers are a pretty simple operation. They can be double action or single action. You're going to load the rounds into the revolver. If you fire in double action mode, then you simply just press the trigger. If you fire into single action mode, then you have to cock that hammer first. What we're looking at right here, this is firing in single action. As you saw, and I'm going to go back. You see how the hammer's already back? So he's manually cocked that hammer and then pressed the trigger. So that's a single action shot. Double action would be that you're pressing the trigger. The trigger press is also cocking the hammer. So it's one motion from you, but the trigger is performing two functions. Any cons to carrying cocked and locked, if that's the way the firearm was designed to be, such as a single action firearm, Abraham, then there's nothing wrong with it. Again, you know, if that's the way the firearm was designed. I always carry with a round in the chamber. If I was carrying a single action, which I don't, I carry striker fire, we'll talk about that. But if I carried a single action, a manual thumb safety is an absolute must because the trigger is such a light press. So there's nothing wrong with cocked and locked if that's the way the firearm was designed to be carried. I personally have no problem with manual thumb safeties as long as the user is training to disengage that safety as they're presenting the firearm. They have to make that presentation just part of their trigger press, right? Turn off the safety as you're presenting the firearm, and as you're coming back into your high ready, you're turning that safety back on. And the reason being, we've seen dash cam footage of officers who have never trained to disengage that safety, and they come out of holster, they present the firearm, and it's not shooting, and then they look at it, turn off the safety, and shoot. 2 seconds in a gunfight is a matter of life and death. Most gunfights don't last 3 seconds. So if you are going to carry with the manual safety, the only con is you absolutely 100% must be training to disengage the safety as part of your presentation. Everyone should be taking an advanced training class. We have defensive pistol classes that we offer, and that is something that if you show up with a safety, and Robert, who's here in watching the stream, will tell you he's taken my defensive pistol level 1 class, and I made him ride that safety. So double action, single action revolvers. This revolver is capable of firing in either double action or single action. You can either cock the hammer to make it single action, or you can just press the trigger to fire. As we've discussed, double action is a longer, heavier, more deliberate trigger press. Cocking the hammer manually creates a lighter, more crisp trigger press, which is generally speaking a more accurate shot. If we talk about the parts of a revolver, again, DASA, let's start here at the hammer. It's got to have an exposed hammer if it's double action. I'm sorry, it's got to have an exposed hammer if it's going to be single action, because you have to manually cock the hammer for single action. So if it doesn't have an exposed hammer, it's always going to be double action only. You've got a cylinder release right here, and that allows you to open up the cylinder. Your cylinder releases, generally speaking, are going to push forward. Sometimes they're going to push down. On older revolvers, you actually kind of sort of pull it back. So you just have to be aware and be familiar with how your firearm operates. You've got your grips. Grips are sometimes removable, though not always. The grips are a great way, if they're removable, of tailoring that firearm to fit your hand. We're going to talk about fit towards the end of the video, but keep in mind the grips are a great way, be it a revolver or a semi-auto, of making sure that the firearm fits who you are as a person. And that's a big thing that we see a lot of people getting the wrong firearm for who they are. You know, people ask me all the time, what kind of gun should I get? What kind of gun should I get? I mean, I can only tell you what works for me and my size hands and my body. And I really can't tell you what works for you, but I can tell you the formula to figure out what works for you, and that's making sure it fits your hands. Trigger, the boom switch, right? Obviously, you press the trigger to make it go boom. We've obviously got the trigger guard here as well. Ejector rod on a revolver, after you open up that cylinder release, the cylinder pops out, you hit the ejector rod, and that's going to eject those spent rounds out of that cylinder. We've got our front sight and our rear sights, you know, sight alignment, sight picture. With defensive concealed carry size revolvers, you generally don't have much of a rear sight at all. It's really more of a point and shoot, which is fine. At self-defense situations, you honestly don't have to focus on that sight alignment as much as you do for more precision distance shots. So if you're going to, personal preference, if you are going to carry a revolver, I would highly recommend having the hammer removed or buying a revolver that has an integral hammer, a shrouded hammer. These hammers have been known, and you can see videos when people draw that firearm out, it gets snagged on clothing. And that's definitely not something that you want in a defensive situation. So if you choose to carry a revolver, which for many reasons I don't prefer, but if you do choose to carry a revolver, you definitely don't want an exposed hammer, in my opinion, because it can get snagged on clothing. So in that case, you kind of want like a shrouded hammer. In this picture, what they call an integral hammer. It actually does have a hammer which is inside. This happens to be the Luger LCR light carry revolver. It's double action only, and I'm going to tell you that LCR has the nicest trigger I've ever felt on a revolver. It's very light, it's very snappy because it's a polymer frame revolver, but the self-defense situation, hopefully you don't need to, you know, if I go to the range and I shoot a couple hundred rounds, that's not realistic of a self-defense situation. So this is an option. If you choose to carry a revolver, something like this might be an option. So because the hammer is hidden inside, it is, again, double action only. You can't cock the hammer because it's hidden inside. Joe asks, holster draw and dry fire drills really help with the manual safety muscle memory. Be sure your pistol is safe. Absolutely. Be sure your pistol is safe. Guys, let me also say, if any of you are following this and you're working with your firearms in any way, shape, or form, please absolutely 100% make sure that they're clear. No ammunition anywhere in the room. We don't want to have any accidents. We don't want to have any negligent discharges. Muscle memory, I'm sorry, dry fire 100% helps. The SIRT pistol, just as an example, I've shot every single light switch in my house 1,000 times with this. Just maybe sitting there on the couch watching TV, just pegging that light switch has really tremendously helped with my own marksmanship abilities. If you have, going back to a manual safety, if you dry fire with your holster and you come out of holster and you turn off that safety as you present, and you do that, you know, hundreds of times a month, you're going to be building tremendous muscle memory. It's going to then come completely automatic in a life and death situation. You're going to come out of holster and present, and And, you know, I don't practice with the manual safety because I don't carry with the manual safety. But if you do practice with the manual safety, it's just going to be automatic, and that's what we want. We want learned automated responses in a life and death situation when our brain, certain parts of our brain, the thought centers of our brain turn off, and the instinctive parts of our brain take over. You know, that's definitely what you want, and muscle and dry fire helps build that. So semi-automatic pistols are a little more complex in how they operate. A revolver is a very simplistic firearm. Semi-automatic pistols have the slide that moves back and forth. We'll show you that video in just a second. And when it slides back and forth from the power of the round going off, that's what drives the slide. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Bullet goes that way, slide goes that way. The slide does a couple of things. It's going to extract and eject that spent casing. It's going to then feed that next round so you're ready to fire again. So that's what a semi-automatic pistol does. If we look at the video here, we see this is a single action. You see the slide reciprocating. You see that spent brass being shot out. And you see the firearm. You can't see it's stripping and feeding the next round. And it's going back in the battery. It's ready to fire again. So the slide just slides back and forth, but as it's sliding back and forth, it extracts, ejects, and feeds the next round. We're looking here at a single action only semi-automatic pistol. Okay, what makes this one single action only is it can only fire in single action. You have to manually cock that hammer. So single action only are great target pistols, not really the best method for self-defense, not bad if you train with them, definitely not a beginner's pistol because you've got that manual safety that you have to definitely train and practice with. So a single action semi-automatic can only be fired after the hammer has been cocked. You cock the hammer either with your thumb or you're going to cock it when you chamber that round. By operating the slide. So that is what the single action is. A single action is always going to have a hammer. Single action, everyone that I'm familiar with has a manual thumb safety. You've got a grip safety, not always. That's something that's kind of optional. You don't always have that grip safety. You're going to have your magazine release. Your magazine release, keep this in mind. On most American firearms, it's going to be in this area and it's going to be a button that you press in. On some European firearms, it's going to be in that area and it's going to be a button that you press down. Muscle memory and consistency. If all of your defensive firearms operate the same, you don't need to think about how they operate. If you're going to go with one of those HK type pistols that has the flappy paddles, I like to call them, when you push down, then all of your defensive pistols should have that same flappy paddle. Also keep in mind, sometimes the magazine release will be right here on the front strap of the grip. And then some older European firearms, it's actually on the bottom of the magazine. But for all intents and purposes, most firearms are going to have a button right here in this area. Be familiar with how your defensive firearm works. You've got a slide lock takedown lever on this specific 1911 style. It's a combination. Not all firearms are going to be combinations like this one. It may have a separate slide stop from the takedown. So again, be familiar with how your firearm works. Front sight, rear sight, making sure you know how to align those sights, and your slide, as we discussed. It goes forwards and backwards. That's all it does. So here again is our SIG P229. That's the double action, single action. It can be fired double action or single action. To fire it double action, you just press the trigger. To fire it single action, you would manually cock the hammer. Or fire that first round and the hammer gets cocked for you. A few things that are different, and this is why I don't like, this is one of the reasons besides the consistency issue that I don't like double action, single action. We've got a decocker here, which is, if we look at pictures further back, in this area we have a slide stop. Right? And so if I've trained on that muscle memory, in this area, here's my slide stop, and now all of a sudden it's a decocker. I can tell you 100% of the time you put a 229 in my hands, and when it comes time to lock that slide back, I'm hitting the decocker and it's doing nothing. Why? Because the slide stop is behind the decocker. The decocker is there if you've got the firearm ready to go in single action mode, but you decide you don't need to shoot and you want to put it back into double action. You hit that decocker. It's generally not considered safe, and some firearms won't allow you to actually hold that hammer, press the trigger, and ease it forward. Definitely not a good look. You want to use the decocker to decock the hammer. Again, this has a takedown lever. You know, your firearm may have a takedown lever similar to this. It may have a pin. It may have some buttons in the front. Be familiar with exactly how your firearm works. And that's not too critical to the operation of the firearm in a defensive use. Double action only semi-automatics are going to have a hammer that's going to be hidden inside the slide. Okay, so you've got that long, heavy trigger press. You don't happen, this is a 6-hour P250. You don't see the hammer. You can't manually cock the hammer, but it's there. So you've got that benefit of the long, heavy, deliberate trigger press on the double action only. Then you have what is the most common type of firearm nowadays, and that is the modern striker fire handgun. That's going to be your Glocks. That's going to be your XDMs, your M&Ps. That's going to be your 320s. That's going to be like 85% of the firearms that are sold on the market for defensive purposes are going to be striker fire handguns. The action on the previous slides, it's a little bit different, right? Because it doesn't have a hammer. It has a firing pin that's kept inside the slide, and that firing pin, because it doesn't have a hammer, it has a slightly different type of action. However, it operates similarly to a double action in that as you're pressing the trigger, you're actually pushing back that firing pin just a little bit before you release it. Now, it is a mechanism unique to itself. Some people want to pigeonhole striker fire as double action. Striker fire is striker fire. The trigger weight is a little bit heavier than a single action, but generally speaking, although it can be monkeyed back and forth with stronger springs, lighter springs, whatever, it's generally speaking from the factory going to be more than a single action, less than a double action in terms of length of pull and weight. Just something that you'll have to experiment for yourself. So it's kind of in the middle. It's a nice sweet spot. And again, as I said, instead of using a hammer, it has a firing pin. To get an idea of how those single actions operate, of how the striker fires operate, if we look here in this picture, right now the firearm is in battery. And what we mean is that the firearm is ready to go. If you press that trigger, it's going to go bang, okay? The next step is we've pressed the trigger and now it's going bang. So if we go back here, you understand that we have an internal safety here that prevents that firing pin from moving forward. So that's one of the safeties that this is a cutaway of a Glock, and that's one of the safeties that the Glock does have. So if you drop that firearm, for example, the firing pin isn't going to move forward. So we've pressed the trigger, now we have ignition. That firing pin is going to ignite the primer, which ignites the powder, which pushes the bullet through the barrel. I agree, Joe. Decockers are unnerving to me. I'd rather clear the firearm and then put it back into battery by reloading. It's just one of the reasons I don't like the DASA. Again, as I've said, muscle memory and consistency. You know, it's all emotion hitting the decocker and kind of expecting it to go off. It never does, but hey, Murphy's Law, right? That one time. That's why keep it pointed in a safe direction and keep the finger off the trigger. So we've got the ignition, then we've got the extraction. So right now we've got that locking block here starting to release. The locking block holds the barrel in place. So now as we've got the inertia pushing back, the locking block is going to start slipping out of the way. The barrel is then, the slide is pushing backwards. The barrel may or may not tilt up depending on the type of firearm you have. As the slide is pushing backwards, it's pulling out, the extractor is pulling out that spent case, and then it's going to eject it. Okay, so it gets rid of that old case so that it can feed the next case. So what it's doing is it's taking the next round off the top of the magazine, and now the breech face right here is pushing that round into the chamber and getting ready to go again. That is it. So you're in battery. So after you have your feeding, you're back in battery. And then you ignite, and you extract, and you eject. Come on. And then you feed, and then you repeat, however many rounds you have. Any questions about striker fire handguns or any of the other semi-automatics that we talked about? We're going to have rifling in our barrel. The rifling, it doesn't matter if it's striker fire, it doesn't matter if it's double action, single action. You're going to have rifling on any modern handgun. And the rifling is like when a quarterback throws a spiral. That spiral allows that football to go where he wants it. It's going to be more consistent. It's going to be more accurate. It's going to be a further throw than if you were to just tumble it. And that's the same thing with the round, with the bullet that exits the muzzle. It's spinning, and that spin creates the consistency of impact, point of aim, point of impact. And that rifling also creates more distance. So you've got a better distance and you've got a better accuracy, and you're going to have rifling no matter what type of firearm it is. As we previously said, you've got a firing pin safety. That's so that the gun doesn't go off if you drop it. This is the firing pin kept on a spring. That's for striker fired handguns. You've also got the locking block. As I said, this is a Glock cutaway, and that locking block is what keeps that barrel tight and locked into the action of the firearm, so it's not wiggling, so you do have an accurate shot, and then unlocks as the slide reciprocates. If we look at a magazine inside the firearm, of course you've got your spring and you've got your follower. The spring is what pushes the rounds up. The follower is what keeps them staggered and lined up properly. A Glock, and this is not true of all striker-fired firearms, but the Glock has a trigger safety. Okay, that trigger safety here, again, prevents the firearm from firing if you were to drop it. You actually have to depress that trigger just a little bit, that safety, before you even make contact with the trigger. The gun will not go off if that safety is not depressed. I knew a person who actually took a soldering iron and melted, and basically glued or welded the trigger safety to the trigger. Don't do that. Your firearm was designed to operate a certain way. If it's a defensive firearm, I'm not a fan of modifying the actions personally. You don't want to give a prosecutor any ammunition to use against you to say that you modified your gun to make it any more deadly or dangerous. So definitely, if you don't want a trigger safety, then buy a gun that doesn't have a trigger safety. You have the recoil spring here. The recoil spring is what causes when that, again, bullet goes that way, slide goes that way, but the recoil spring is what makes the slide go back into battery in the after firing. Tom Stahl says, this vid is not for the uninitiated. Never handle any firearm that you're not familiar with its function. Good vid, but the only way to learn is hands-on. Absolutely, Tom. This webinar doesn't take place of hands-on. If we were in class, in the classroom environment, after we went through all of this information and safety and all of that, then we would introduce you to actual firearms and dummy ammunition, making sure you know how to load and unload and deal with the manipulations and malfunctions, and then we'd take you to the range. So you're 100% correct. This is really just a spoiler. This is just an intro. But there's no replacement for hands-on training under the tutelage of a qualified instructor. Absolutely agree. Let's talk about magazines. So this is a magazine, not a clip, right? We have two types of magazines here, and they're very, very similar. The only real difference is the width, the thickness. Okay, these are both, well, this is a 380 magazine, and this is a 9mm magazine. This being a single stack, and if you look, they're really almost identical in height. There's not much difference in height. Obviously, the double stack is just a little bit longer, but not much. Because this is a single stack, this is an 8-round magazine. Because the rounds are just stacked on top of each other. You can see here in this picture, they're just stacked on top of each other. Because this is a double stack, this one is a 16-round magazine, and I've got some double stacks that are 20-round magazines. Because they are staggered, as you see in this picture here, they're staggered, so you can carry more rounds. Now, what's the benefit of a single stack? Good for a person who has smaller hands. A little bit more concealable if you're carrying. The benefit of a double stack, I have bigger hands, so I actually prefer a double stack. It's easier for me when it's in the firearm to fit my hand around a double stack. Single stacks just seem way too small. Also, the round capacity is very important, because I want everyone, one second, Don, we'll talk about the clip thing in a second. In the chat, tell me how many rounds you think it takes to stop the threat. I want to see everyone's guess. How many shots does it take to stop the threat? Getting to your clip question, clip is something different than a magazine. There are stripper clips. Stripper clips are meant for feeding rounds into a magazine. There are other types of internal clips, like with the Garand. Clips are, they're not magazines. Magazines are ammunition feeding devices. Clips help you load magazines faster. A stripper clip will help you load a magazine faster. The reason why people get their panties in a bunch in the debate about magazines and clips is basically because it's the anti-gun politicians and it's the gangbangers that use the word clip. So you kind of sort of put yourself into one of those two categories when you say clip instead of magazine. Is it the end of the world? No, everyone knows what you're talking about if you refer to a magazine as a clip, but it is a magazine, and try to use in that regards the proper words, because like I said, it's the anti-gun politicians that are standing on the TV calling them high-capacity clipazines and things of that nature, showing their ignorance, and you don't want to be lumped into the same category. All right, so how many rounds does it take to stop a threat? We've got Steve says 1. I guess if you shoot him in the brain, you'd be right, Steve. Tammy says 2. George says 3 to 5. Lori doesn't have any clue. Lori, you're actually right, and I'll get back to that in a second. Dion says just one good one. Scott says all of them. He also says until it's not a threat anymore, and Scott's right about that. Joe, every attacker is going to be different. Shot placement is also a factor. Too many variables to say. I'm going to tell you guys this. You shoot to stop the threat. I don't know how many rounds that's going to take, and you don't know how many rounds that's going to take. The only person that knows how many rounds it's going to take is the threat. You stop shooting when they stop doing whatever it was that made you start shooting in the first place. When we look at self-defense shootings and we look at police shootings, I can show you videos. In fact, I shared the link for our YouTube page. I can show you videos where it's taken 14 shots on one person. 2 officers fired 14 shots. Sure, some of those may have been misses, but you're probably going to miss too. 14 shots to stop the threat. That was East Cleveland, Ohio, a couple of years ago. On our YouTube page, we also have a video from, I think it was Michigan last summer. It took 12 shots, 11 or 12 shots to stop the threat. There's a guy coming up to the police officer, charging at her with a knife. And it took, like I said, 11 or 12 shots to stop the threat. We know, statistically speaking, most self-defense situations, we're not talking about police situations now, we're talking about concealed carry licensees. We know that the statistically perfect gunfight is 3 rounds at 3 yards, and the fight is over in 3 seconds. That is the law of 3, the statistically perfect gunfight. Having said that, though, if there's multiple attackers, if you're missing, if they're on drugs. You don't know how many rounds it takes to stop a threat. Personally speaking, I carry double stack. I can conceal the double stack. It happens to work well for my size of body. I can conceal it. Not everyone can. I can grip it very well because I have large size hands. Not everyone does. So it's going to be a personal preference. But capacity, in my opinion, is important. If I were to carry a double stack, a single stack, I would absolutely carry a spare magazine. Having said that, I carry double stack and I still carry a spare magazine in case there's ever a magazine malfunction. They can happen. All right. We've got a little chart here, and unfortunately my presentation is about to malfunction, so I'm going to back out here. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the different types of firearms. If we look at the double action only revolver, it is a very low skill requirement. It is a very beginner friendly gun. You point and press. That's it. That's all you really need to know. If it doesn't go bang, you press again. There's some pros and cons to that malfunction of it not going bang, but there's no additional buttons, no safeties, no decockers, none of that you need to worry about. It's that long, heavy, deliberate trigger press, which, as I said, your finger is your safety. Don't rely on a double action trigger to be the safety for you. Disassembling for cleaning is so simple. You hit that cylinder release and you clean it. There's no disassembly. It's one button. So for cleaning purposes, it's incredibly simple. As I said before, if a round fails to fire, you just press the button again. Let's talk about that for a second. So a misfire is a click when you want to bang. And we're going to get into this a little bit deeper with malfunctions and ammunition, but you could have what we call hang fire, and that is a delayed fire. Maybe some slightly damp powder or slightly damp primer, and it goes off. The longest recorded hang fire, I believe, is like 20-25 seconds. So that round is still in the cylinder, and if you have a hang fire in the cylinder, you could have a catastrophic failure of the firearm. So I was talking about hang fire with the revolver. The hang fire is click, pause, bang. The longest recorded hang fire was something like 20 seconds. I can't tell you what to do in a revolver. If you have a click and no bang, I can tell you I'll press that trigger again if my life is in danger. On the range, I'm going to stop, I'm going to pause, I'm going to wait, I'm going to keep the gun pointed down range and count to 30. In a life and death situation, I'm just going to press the trigger again. Keep in mind, if you press the trigger again and it is a hang fire and that round is still in that chamber, still in that cylinder, you could have a catastrophic failure of the firearm, which could cause injury to your hand. Again, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can only tell you that I would press the trigger again, because if my life is in danger, I would trade my hand for my life. So I apologize about the audio, people. No idea what happened. Let's look at the double action only striker fire handgun, semi-automatic. It's a moderate skill level. Moderate is, again, slightly higher because it has the malfunction manipulation, right? To disassemble it requires one extra step. You can disassemble a semi-automatic pistol in less than 30 seconds once you've got the hang of it, once you know what you're doing. So still a very simplistic firearm, the striker fire, to use. We talk about the safeties. You can have a safety on a semi-automatic pistol. So just something to keep in mind. Generally speaking, there's no safeties, but oftentimes there is. If you have a safety, you work it, you write it, you get used to it, you make it muscle memory. If you don't have a safety, no problem. I don't want to hear from any of you saying that I'm just going to keep the safety off, because Murphy's Law says that the safety is that what can go wrong will go wrong, and will go wrong at the most inopportune time. So if you pull that firearm out of your holster and the safety is accidentally on, the gun's not going to go bang. So you definitely, either if you don't want to work the safety, then don't carry with a safety. Have it removed or buy a different gun. There's a higher ammunition capacity, which is definitely a pro, right? Having extra rounds. The only time that you ever have too many rounds is when you're swimming, right? Any other time, and it's not a bad thing. The cons is, they talk about the probability for failure is higher. It's not really. The probability for failure is really kind of the same. If the gun is clean and well maintained, there's not really much more of a probability of failure. But you have to know how to work those manipulations if you do have any sort of malfunctions. When we get into the double action, single action, the DASA, now we're into an intermediate skill level. Now you've got that inconsistent trigger press. Now you've got extra buttons and levers that you need to think about and worry about. So definitely is a higher skill level firearm. Scrolling over here to the chat for a second. Steve, if you're worried about magazine restrictions, then what you need to do is you need to contact your elected officials and tell them to honor their oath and uphold the Second Amendment. Because we, the people, there's anywhere from in the nation, anywhere from 70 to 120 million gun owners. In this nation. In Illinois alone, there's 2.5 million gun owners. There is not a single gun bill that we could not stifle if we only just spoke up. And it is our duty, we the people, our responsibility. If you're worried about some sort of magazine bans, then you need to speak up. You need to contact your elected officials both at the state and the federal level, and you need to tell them to honor the Second Amendment. And the most important thing you can do is recruit additional gun owners to do the same, because 99% of gun owners, true statistic, 99% of gun owners don't do anything to defend their right. And that's why our rights are being taken away. Our silence is our consent. We're giving them through our silence consent to take away our rights. We might complain about it on social media, but that doesn't do anything to protect our rights. You need to contact your elected officials, and you need to not vote for any politician who favors gun control. And like I said, the most important thing you can do is tell a gun owner to do the same. There's not a single gun bill we couldn't stop if we only spoke up. A little off topic, but you brought it up, so I hope that helps you out, Steve. All right, so the DASA, a little bit more complex, has a few extra buttons that you need to worry about. The decocker and the safeties can be confusing in a stress situation, and I'll tell you 100%. That's 100% true. When we have the single action only, that's what we call an advanced gun. Definitely not a beginner's gun. That light, crisp trigger press, something that you need to train and get used to. Having a safety, something that you need to train and get used to. Having that light trigger press, though, is definitely an accurate trigger press. Definitely much less likely to cause a negligent discharge if you have a double action versus a single action. But having very little movement and having very little weight necessary to work that trigger is going to be a more accurate shot. Competition pistols very often will be single action. Like we said, it's not a beginner's gun, it's an advanced gun. The cons, again, in a stress situation, you can have a negligent discharge if you touch that trigger. Your finger is your safety. Don't touch the trigger unless you're ready to shoot. All right, so talking about selecting handguns, we talk about caliber, right? We're going to talk about ammunition, but caliber is important. The size, what's the gun used for? Okay, is this a home defense handgun? Is this a concealed carry handgun? If you're a security officer, as I believe there's a few security officers watching this video, and you're open carrying, you can carry a larger gun because you don't need to conceal it. You're open carrying. So what's the use of the firearm? That's going to definitely be an important factor in selecting that firearm. What holster options work for you? I like to carry strong side inside the waistband. Keep in mind that the more common the firearm, the more likely you are to have holster options. If it's an obscure firearm, then it's harder to get holsters. I had a Beretta 84 Cheetah. Great little firearm. I loved it. It was such a joy to shoot because it was all metal, and because it was all metal, it absorbed more of the recoil. It was also a 380, so an all metal 380 is shot like a 22. I was having a hard time finding holsters. I learned that they weren't making it anymore, and I realized I can sell this gun and buy two other guns, and so that's what I did. So if you can't get if you can't get aftermarket items such as holsters, then if it's for a carry, if that's why you want the gun, then it's not going to do you very good. Unsafe holster is a very bad thing. Soft nylon holsters, soft leather holsters, you stay away from. One size fits all holsters, stay away from. You really want a good quality holster that's designed specifically for your firearm. Try to stay away from the one size fits all. When and where you plan to carry, guess what, guys? Carry always. Carry whenever and wherever legally possible. If we're talking about concealed carry, I'll equate that to a flat tire, to a spare tire. When do you carry your spare tire? Probably always, right? You're going to carry it always because you don't know when you're going to need it. Your concealed carry firearm is the same. Okay, so you should carry whenever and wherever legally possible. Therefore, you want to choose a firearm that is the good size, that you can conceal, that it's not too heavy, that it's uncomfortable. Remember, it's always going to be slightly uncomfortable. Everything is a balancing act. There's going to be a slight bit of discomfort. But if you're going to be concealed carrying this firearm, you want something that you can carry year round. Now, also, weather and time of the year, I say BS. Same gun, same location, same mode of readiness, always. I want muscle memory. I want consistency. I don't want to be thinking about trigger presses. I don't want to be thinking about decockers. I don't want to sometimes carry a single action, sometimes carry a double action. I'm doing myself a disservice. The old cliche is beware the man who only owns one gun. He probably knows how to use it. That's a true statement. And so for me, I carry the same gun year round. There's no flip-flopping of firearms. It's always the same firearm year round. And I carry, like I said, whenever, wherever legally possible. So if we talk about trade-offs, right, a lighter firearm is going to be easier to conceal, but it's going to have snappier recoil. That's just the laws of physics. I can't do anything about that. And if it's not a pleasure to shoot, the chances that you train and practice with it are going to decrease, which means you're not going to be proficient with that firearm. Also, a smaller caliber. If you have a smaller firearm, you may have a smaller caliber, and smaller caliber firearms, when we talk about stopping power and things in one of the future charts, stopping power is a thing. Shot placement is more important. I don't want to jump ahead because we're going to get there. Grip size, grip shape. So the angle of the grip is incredibly important to make sure that it's comfortable for who you are as a person. This SIRT pistol is designed and based off the Glock 17. The angle is great, but let me tell you something about the Glock I don't like is they're generally a little bit boxy back here in the grip. When I go to the range and I shoot a couple hundred rounds, the webbing of my hand hurts. Now, there's nothing wrong with the Glock pistol. I'm not bad-mouthing it. It just, for that reason of that boxiness here in the back, is not my preferred firearm. I'm going to get something that's a little bit more comfortable to shoot for me because then I'm more likely to train and practice with it. So you've got that grip. You've got the distance from the front strap to the back strap. You've got that distance from your finger. So get a good grip, high tang up in there. And is my finger on it enough? Is it on it too much? That's important for accurate shots because if your finger's on it not enough, first off, it can slip off or you can push your shots to the side. And if your finger's on it too much, you can pull your shots to the other side. So just things to consider. Does it fit you? The grip length. If I'm concealing this firearm, is it poking out, sticking out of my shirt? If I'm carrying on my strong side, that's a real thing. I can print. If I'm appendix carrying, which I don't prefer, but a lot of my students do, it's less of an issue. Okay, so those are things that are personal that you need to consider. And the balance of the firearm as well. You know, the balance, right? A lot of people will feel that firearm, it's pointing well, but it's got a full magazine. As it's empty, maybe the front is a little low or a little high in your hand based on the balance. So what I like to do when I'm selecting a firearm, when I'm going to the gun store and I'm choosing a firearm, you know, first I identify, okay, do I want a safety? Do I not want a safety? Do I want striker fire? Do I want whatever? I go through all of those check boxes and I pick a few different firearms that meet what I want. Remember, the firearm is a tool. I'm buying it for a specific purpose. So I've decided what criteria I want, and I find a few firearms that meet that criteria. And then I'll go to the gun store, and of course, you don't point the gun at anyone. I sometimes hate going to gun stores because people are just so haphazardly pointing the guns all over. I'll pick a spot on the wall, or I'll pick a gun on the wall, and I'll push out, come back in, push out, come back in, push out, close my eyes, come back in, push out, open my eyes. And if I'm on target, I'll do that a few times. And if I'm on target, I've got a good natural point of aim with that firearm. If I'm a little high or a little low, I know that that grip angle maybe isn't right for me. If I'm a little to the right or a little to the left, I know I either need to adjust my grip, or that grip distance from the back strap to the front strap isn't right for me, for my size of hand. It's a very personal thing. Steve wants to know, thoughts on carrying at work or leaving it in your car? Carry whenever and wherever legally possible. Now, your employer might have a policy against you carrying a firearm at work, and you could be fired for it. Me personally, I have had jobs that said I couldn't carry, and I did anyway. As long as I don't see, in Illinois, there's a sign that says what, you know, you can't carry here. It's a statutory sign. Different states have different laws. It would be impossible for me to cover the laws of all 50 states. But I'm going to carry, as I said, whenever, wherever legally possible, because I don't know when I'm going to be attacked. If I did know when I was going to be attacked, I wouldn't go, right? So as far as I'm concerned, it's a risk. Getting fired is a risk I'm willing to take. Mark says, an amazing statistic, 100% of home break-ins happen in the home. He's talking about carry in your home. When I say carry whenever and wherever legally possible, Mark is adding carry in your home as well. All right, just scrolling through the chat. All right, so let's see if that widget works for us. Yep, it's not working again. USCCA needs to fix their stuff. We're not going to go through all of the guns, but I just want to show you guys, right? We've got this Smith & Wesson Model 27, and they go through all of the length and the weight, and it's a steel frame, and it's a 38 Special or 357. Great. So if I decide I want a revolver because of simplicity, this would be a pretty good home defense revolver. Okay, yeah, it doesn't have the capacity, but because it's a long barrel, and because it's steel, the recoil is going to be pretty gentle in that firearm. That would be a pretty difficult firearm to carry. Down here, you've got another revolver, smaller, right? Again, we talked about the bobbed hammer, not something I would prefer. Down here, you've got a ridiculously small revolver, North American Arms, which I actually own one of these. The very first firearm I ever bought, age 21, was one of these stupid little single-action only pistols. And the only reason I still have it is because it's the first one I bought, so I'm a little nostalgic. We talked about semi-automatic pistols here. You know, again, if you're carrying on duty a security officer, you can carry a full size like this. For a concealed carry, you might be down in this area here, you know, smaller 4-inch, maybe 3-inch barrel. Keep in mind, there is such a thing as too small. You know, if your two fingers are hanging off, it's harder to shoot, it's snappier to shoot, it's less accurate to shoot. So those are just things that you need to keep in mind. And like I said, we're not going to go through all of the different firearms. It would take all day, but that's just to show you some of the different size options. All right, we've got different types of rounds here. We're only going to really talk about centerfire ammunition. Rimfire ammunition is not really ideal for defensive purposes, so we won't really spend too much time talking about it. If we look here at the two different cartridges, you've got the semi-automatic round and you've got the revolver round. And the difference is the lip at the bottom. The revolver round has a lip at the bottom that's designed so that it stays in that cylinder and doesn't go all the way through. So that's what restricts its movement and keeps it in place. The semi-automatic round has a cutaway out here, down here, and that's where your extractor fits into and will yank that round out of the chamber. So those are really the only two differences between a revolver round and a semi-automatic round. And nowadays, manufacturers, they're going to make revolvers that actually will take a 9mm, and then they just have a clip, a moon clip they call it, that attaches to this cutaway here that allows you to pull those rounds out easier. When we look at a round, a self-contained cartridge, that's what this is. Some people will call it a bullet. It's technically not a bullet. The bullet is the projectile. This is the bullet. This is the bullet. We're looking at an FMJ, a full metal jacket. It has a lead core and it has a copper jacket. Okay, we're going to talk about why jacketed hollow point is better for defensive purposes, but this happens to be full metal jacket. You've got your propellant, your gunpowder, your smokeless powder. That's what burns. That's what expands and ignites and sends that round down range. But it all starts here with the primer. The primer is a contact explosive. And when the firing pin or the hammer strikes that primer ignites the powder burns, pushes the bullet, and that's how the cartridge works. Like I said, if you want to be specific and you want to really be anal about it, the bullet is the projectile, and the technical term is self-contained cartridge. Caliber is obviously important, and there's huge, great debates about caliber. Again, you can't miss fast enough to win. Is 45 better than 9mm? Yeah, 45 has more energy. But I have people in my concealed carry classes all the time that they bring a 45 because they don't make a 46, and then they're shooting minute of man. If you hit the silhouette in the Illinois concealed carry, that counts as a hit. But, for God's sakes, at 15 feet, you really should be able to keep a grouping the size of your fist. So when it comes to caliber, or going back to that idea, you can't miss fast enough to win. Caliber is the size, the diameter of the bullet, not of the case. A lot of times, 45.45 is the American designation, or .380 or .38, again, American designation, and they're talking about the bullet diameter. .45, 45 automatic, Colt pistol, 45 ACP. Well, those are all one and the same. You need to understand what ammunition your firearm shoots. 45 Colt, very confusing, because 45 ACP is 45 automatic Colt pistol. But 45 Colt is not going to fit in a 45 ACP and vice versa. So you really have to be aware. If we talk about 9mm Luger, 9mm Parabellum, 9x19. Those are four names for all the same round. So you've got to know what your gun shoots. A 9mm Luger is not going to shoot a 9mm short. 9mm short is 9x17, also called the 380 ACP. 380 ACP and 9mm short are synonymous. They're one and the same. 9mm short is more of a European designation. It's just what they call it over there because they use the metric and we don't. So keep in mind, you have to understand what your firearm shoots. You can check the barrel in this area here. Generally speaking, it's going to say 9mm. You can check your owner's manual if you haven't modified the firearm or installed any conversion kits. And then also you want to check the ammunition. So I have a spent case here, and if I look at the bottom, the head stamp on the spent case, it says Winchester 45 Auto. So I'm not sure, you guys probably won't be able to see that. but it is on the bottom of that head stamp, Winchester 45 Auto. So I know that that is a 45 ACP. And if I look at this one, 9mm Luger. Okay, so very important you understand what your gun is shooting. And again, what's this? That is the bullet. I actually have a collection of bullets here. Let's see if you can see. In my roofing career, I was a roofer for 20 years. I've pulled these actually out of roofs. What goes up must come down. Firearms are not fireworks. So I save these as a reminder and I show them in my classes. Firearms are not fireworks. No celebratory gunfire. Robert says, for defensive rounds, do you prefer frangible or hollow point? Absolutely 100% hollow point. I haven't done any testing with frangible rounds. Frangible rounds are designed for impacting hard surfaces, such as a door or a wall or a steel target. Hollow point rounds are designed for what they call hydraulic media. Hydraulic media is a really nice politically correct term for saying flesh, human flesh or animal flesh. Hollow point rounds, and we're going to get to this, are designed to impact when they impact, designed to expand when they impact hydraulic media. So for defensive purposes, 100% hands down, my preference is hollow point ammunition. But like I said, we're jumping ahead just a little bit. So guys, just important to make sure you understand what your gun is shooting. Caliber is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. Talk about bullet weight. The bullet is measured in grains, and the grain is the actual weight of the bullet. If we look here, there's 7,000 grains in a pound. Generally speaking, in 9mm, for example, will be 115, 124, or 147. And those grains are important for a few things. Obviously, more weight means more kinetic energy, but some barrel lengths like a heavier bullet more than shorter. So for target shooting, for defensive training, I'm going to get whatever's cheapest on the market. But for defensive rounds, I do a lot of practicing as far as what round works the most accurately, the most reliably out of my firearm. So keep in mind, grains is another weight. So you might have, a 9mm 115 grain or 147 grain. It's something you want to be aware of. Case volume. The size of the case does determine how much powder the manufacturer can put into that case. Now, it's not an end-all, be-all, but having said that, it does give you a good indication of how much powder might be in the case. More powder means more velocity, and that's something that's important, velocity, especially when we're talking about defensive rounds. If we look here, we have, these are all .22 rounds, right? You've got the .223, you've got the 5.7, and you've got the .22 long rifle. These happen to all be 40 grains, although standard .223 is generally 55 grains. You can still get 40 grain. So these are all 40 grains. So you've got the same weight, you've got the same diameter, but because of the powder capacity, you have a much higher velocity. So you're going to have actually more energy that's dumping into the target. And that's important. Knockdown power. We've got a formula here that talks about knockdown power, and it can be confusing. And to be honest with you, shot placement beats knockdown power 100% of the time. So I don't want anyone to get confused. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to kind of show you where certain rounds fall on this map here. What do they call it? They call it the Taylor knockout formula. If we look at the 357 SIG, which is a viable self-defense cartridge, not incredibly popular, but certainly an option. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not popular. We're right there in the middle. And then we look at this 5.7, which has a much higher velocity. It's down here because this is actually designed for defeating soft barriers, okay? Soft body armor, for example. This round, depending on the tip, determines what it's been designed for. But you're down here near the bottom in this red and yellow area. And if we go through the 10 millimeter, which is snappy as heck, one of the largest rounds for handguns, it's way up here. But can you accurately shoot it? That's something you need to ask yourself. This is something you might carry if you're hunting as a backup gun. If you're in the wilds, shoot a bear with it. 38 special right here in the middle, right? That's if you're going to carry a revolver, you're probably going to be in a 38 special plus P. We haven't talked about what plus P means. Plus P means plus pressure. A lot of modern defensive firearms will be designed to receive plus P cartridges. If your firearm is not designed for plus P cartridges, do not carry plus P, because they're designed for a specific pressure and you're putting a higher pressure load in your firearm, and over time it's going to cause failure to that firearm. It's going to wear out quicker, it's going to cause stress cracks, and eventually could blow up in your hands. Definitely not something that you want. Nothing wrong with plus P if your gun was designed for it. Stay away from plus P plus. That's definitely not something that you want. There's no standardization for plus P plus. Plus P is okay if your gun was designed for it. Stay away from plus P plus. If we look here in the middle, you've got that plus P. And then if you look here, the regular goes down, so it doesn't have the pressure or the velocity. 357 up on the list. 22 long rifle way down on the list. Would 22 long rifle be my first choice for defensive purposes? Absolutely not. But if that's all I had, then so be it. But certainly wouldn't be my first choice. 9mm Luger right in the middle. Guys, I'm going to make it super simple for you. If you're not sure what rounds you want for defensive purposes in a handgun, you're going to start with the 9mm, because you can go up or you can go down from there. It's really that simple. There's nothing wrong with the 9mm in modern ammunition. It's definitely going to do what it's intended to do, and that's to stop the threat. So now I'm curious what anyone here who has a home defense gun or a concealed carry gun, I'm curious what caliber you guys have for your home defense guns. Robert, this is for you. You asked about hollow points. This is why I like hollow points. Steve, you can find 9mm. It's not cheap. You're not going to pay 2019 prices. But if you go on to ammoseek.com, I have no affiliation with the company. I've referred thousands of people over the years. That's where I find most of my ammunition. AmmoSeek is a search engine. They compile lists of everyone who has in-stock ammunition at this point in time. Right now, 9mm, let's say 2 weeks ago, it was 68 cents a round. And right now it's about 59 cents a round. So the prices are coming down just a little bit. You can buy all you want. It's available, but you're not paying 2019 prices. In 2019, I was paying 15, 17 cents a round. So it's there, but you're going to pay for it. Yeah, 9mm seems to be what everyone, 999. You use FMJ, Steve? Why is that? Aren't you worried about over-penetration and exit wounds? We're going to talk about that in just a second. Lori, just got your FOID. I'm happy you got it. I'm sad that we need it in Illinois. 45 and 9. Where'd you get that, Dion? 65 cents a round for 9? Where'd you get that? All right, so looking at the hollow points. Reason number one to have hollow point ammunition, it is designed to stop in the body of an attacker. You see here it expands. It's designed to expand and dump that energy into the attacker. Okay, so your 9mm may expand to 1/2 inch in size. That expansion dumps more energy, which stops the threat much quicker. Okay, looking at real-world statistics in 1998, 46% of innocent bystanders who were struck by police bullets were hit by rounds that went in and out exit wounds. So they hit their attacker, but the round kept going through and through. Exit wounds, remember, you're responsible for every round that exits your muzzle. If I'm the attacker and you shoot me, maybe it's justified. But the person behind me, standing behind me, that also gets hit, you're liable. So that's a very important reason why hollow points are preferred for defensive purposes. Also, reason number 2. As I said, they're designed to shock. They're designed to dump that energy. So you're not going to have an exit wound, or you're less likely to have an exit wound. But at the same point in time, it's faster at stopping the threat because it's dumping more energy. You see, we've got this wound cavity here. That's part of the reason is the expansion, that wound cavity. It grows, and then it continues on. It's dumping that energy. This is ballistics gelatin. They do ballistics gelatin tests. This is how they determine the effectiveness. It's an FBI standardization test, but this is how they determine the effectiveness of hollow point ammunition. And although ballistic gelatin isn't a 100% medium equal to human flesh, at the same point in time, it does give a baseline standardization. You can check penetration to make sure you're not under penetrating, to make sure you're not over penetrating, to make sure you've got a consistent expansion, those sorts of things. Lucky Gunner, another company I do not have any affiliation with, they have all sorts of ballistics gelatin tests with all sorts of different ammunition. And you can see really, I talk to some people and they just buy ammo based upon the marketing, right? And okay, I guess right now you get what you can get, but when it comes to defensive ammunition, for me, it's more scientific. I want to make sure I have that consistent penetration, which isn't under or over penetrating. I want to make sure I have a consistent expansion, that, multiple 5-round shots, all 5 rounds are expanding. And I want to make sure that it's consistent expansion in terms of they're all expanding to the same diameter. Those things are important. And it's important that the round is fired out of the same gun. The same barrel length, right? If you're carrying a 4-inch, make sure it's tested out of a 4-inch because barrel length does equal more velocity. Steve, buy online. I mean, I know support local businesses, but buy online because you can get whatever you want. The honest truth is, online, the defensive rounds were never in shortage. Not online. In the stores, people just bought everything that was available. But online, the defensive rounds barely even went up in price. The Full Metal Jacket, they had a 300-400% increase in price. But the defensive rounds, maybe 20, 30, 40% increase. So I bought HSTs in the middle of the shortage. Everyone was saying there was a shortage, and I had bought a couple boxes of HSTs, and I only spent, like I said, probably 20% more than I had in the previous year. So, like I said, support local businesses is great, but if they don't have what you need, then it just makes sense, go online. So barrel length matters. There's more velocity. If we look at this chart here, I want to explain something. Ammunition manufacturers are designing ammunition nowadays for specific barrel lengths. If you get, like, for example, Hornady Critical Duty, that's designed to be shot out of a 5-inch barrel. Critical Defense, and defeat the FBI protocols with barriers and all of that stuff. Critical Defense is designed to be fired out of a 4-inch barrel with none of the barriers, no windshields or anything like that we're probably not going to have to shoot through. You've got a mechanical engineer designing a bullet to expand at a certain velocity. You've got a chemical engineer designing the powder to burn at a certain rate to create that velocity, and they're working together because they know that a 4-inch barrel is going to have less velocity than a 5-inch barrel. If we look here, we've got a 3-inch barrel. If we click here, we've got a 4-inch barrel. Just looking at 9mm at 1173 on a 4-inch barrel and 1105 on a 3-inch barrel. If we come up here to the 5-inch barrel, we're 1233. More velocity. Velocity means more energy. And if you're using hollow point ammunition, means a more reliable, consistent expansion on the jacketed hollow point ammunition. Obviously, 5-inch barrel is not something everybody can conceal, but keep that in mind. Ammunition is designed a lot of times for a specific barrel length. Also, keep in mind some of the light loads, what they call light loads. Federal made one. I forgot what it was exactly called. It was marketed for women. It had the pink ribbons on it. Well, a portion of profits are donated for breast cancer, etc. They really targeted women. The problem was that specific round, that light load, in some firearms, specifically what I witnessed for myself, the FNS compact, it did not have enough energy to reliably cycle that slide. So it's definitely not something that I would want to carry. Forget, I've never even saw any of the ballistics tests. I don't know what the expansion was. I don't know what the penetration was, but I can only assume if it's a light load, it's not going to have as much expansion, as much velocity, as much penetration. So more barrel length means, generally speaking, more velocity. More velocity means more energy. Ammunition care and storage is important. I like to tell people that if your delivery driver is not cursing you out, you didn't order enough ammunition. Someone asked on social media the other day, probably yesterday, how many rounds. I'm new to guns, and how many rounds should I have on hand? Her and another new gun owner were saying that, I keep 500 rounds on hand. But let me tell you, I don't think 500 rounds is enough. The reason being, it may seem like a big number. It's really not. I recommend everyone take one advanced training class a year. You got to sharpen your skills, keep them sharp. That, generally speaking, most advanced classes are going to be 500 rounds a day. I'll give you an example. I'll be attending an instructor class, a 3-day instructor class in a couple months, and we're shooting 1,200 rounds, 400 rounds a day. If I only have 500 rounds on hand, especially nowadays with the shortage, it's hard to get ammunition. You don't buy toilet paper by the roll. You probably buy maybe 6 rolls. I buy mine by the box, so I'm getting a case that has maybe 40 rolls in it. And that's just because I know I'm going to need it. I might as well get it. I like to tell people, keep 1,000 rounds minimum on hand. If you go to the gun range, you're probably going to shoot off 200 rounds right in an hour. So if you think, I'm only going to have 500 rounds on hand, it might not be enough. I buy my ammo by the case, 1,000 rounds minimum. I buy it online, have it shipped to my house, no problem. Keep your ammunition in a cool, dry place. Humidity is the enemy, and humidity, right? Basements, garages. If you have to store it in a basement or a garage, use an ammo can or some kind of airtight container, like a 5-gallon bucket or something. Also, you might want to keep the ammunition in the original factory box, and that's important for later on down the road. 5 years later, you forgot what this was. Well, hey, you look at the box, real easy to tell. Not the end of the world. I usually buy my ammo, as I said, by the case, and sometimes if I can get a deal, I'll buy it loose. It's just a bag, It's 1,000 rounds based on weight. And so that bag, so there's no factory packaging. It's not the end of the world, but it is nice. It does help. So you can easily identify what the round is. Do not expose the ammunition to water or solvents, because that is going to ultimately render the ammunition useless. Use the correct ammunition for your gun, as we previously said. Check the barrel and check the head stamp. Make sure it's the right stuff. Inspect the ammunition prior to loading. Make sure there's no dents in the rounds. I've seen cases that are pretty beat up, especially nowadays with these ammunition shortages, and the manufacturers are working 3 shifts and they've got the machines cranked up to maximum, and they hired new people that don't really know what they're doing. Quality control has gone down across the board for every manufacturer. I don't care who. So you definitely want to inspect the rounds as you're loading them into your magazines to make sure that they're serviceable. Also, you want to make sure there's no corrosion, right? If they've been exposed to humidity, that brass can start to tarnish. Not the end of the world, but if it starts to really get tarnished heavily, then it could cause malfunctions in the magazine or extraction out of the chamber or feeding into the chamber. So good idea to make sure there's no corrosion. And very important, avoid chambering and unchambering the same round multiple times. So what I mean is, I've got the magazine, the magazine's in the firearm. Let's say I come home at the end of the day, I drop the magazine out, throw that round in the drawer, put the gun in the drawer, whatever. Next morning, take that round, put it in the magazine, top off, chamber. Okay, now the same round is back in there. When you're introducing that round into the chamber multiple times, you can have what they call bullet setback issues. And the bullet setback is that bullet is designed to be set a specific distance into the case. And if it gets pushed in and pushed in and pushed in further, you can actually have overpressure, create a higher pressure, basically making like a plus P round or a plus P plus round. And that's going to cause damage to your gun. I've seen firearms that have been damaged beyond repair from bullet setback issues, from rechambering around repeatedly. So that's definitely something to avoid doing. See if we have any questions here. Are there certain brands of ammunition that you would steer people to for home defense? So, Steve, I like Federal HSTs. Hornady Critical Defense are also good. Like I said, look at Lucky Gunner. Look at the type of ammunition as far as, is it 9mm, is it 45, whatever. Look at their testing, their ballistics gelatin testing. They're going to have 30, 40, 50 rounds for every caliber. And look at the penetration, look at the expansion, look at the consistency of both, and then buy them and test them. Now here on this slide here, it says 2 to 250 rounds to ensure reliability. I get it, guys. That's, even before the shortage, that's $200, $250. That's a lot of money. You put a box through it. Test the box. Make sure it's 100% reliable. And then if it is, go buy another box, and that's the box that you carry. So first you're looking at those check boxes of expansion and penetration, and then you're doing your tests, your function tests to make sure it works 100% of the time. The funny thing is the HSTs that I like in my 320, they're much less accurate in my XDM. Both 9mm, just less accurate. Different guns like different ammunition, so you definitely have to test. Thoughts on Barnes? I have nothing against Barnes. They're another reputable manufacturer. Why do people tell me not to buy steel? That's a great question. Steel case ammunition will cause premature wear on your firearm. Now, I was actually talking to another instructor today about this. We know that steel case ammunition will cause premature wear to your extractor, maybe to your chamber. However, we're talking about 10,000 rounds. I'm kind of coming around to the idea. I've always been, I want brass, I want aluminum. I want brass, I want aluminum. But I'm kind of coming around to the idea that other than in my defensive firearm and all my other range toys, steel is not necessarily the worst thing, because I'm going to save, again, we're talking pre-COVID prices, I'm going to save so much money by shooting steel that I could replace those parts. I could buy a new gun after 10,000 rounds. So that's just something to consider. Another thing is a lot of ranges don't let you shoot steel case ammunition. So you have to know where you're going if they allow it, if you're going to buy it. If you are working a bolt action rifle, you will feel the difference. Feeding and extracting, you will feel the difference. Steel is not as slick. It's not as lubricous as brass is. So as you're extracting and feeding the rounds, you're going to have to use more force. And think about that, your semi-automatic firearms are going to also have to use more force. So ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world if you use steel. Just keep in mind it does wear out parts quicker. I would keep it out of my defensive guns, but everything else, I'm kind of coming around to the idea that, like I said, the wear is going to be 10,000 rounds down the road, so it really doesn't matter. All right, so ammunition malfunctions, right? We've got the misfire, we've got the squib load, and what they're not showing is we also have a hang fire. A misfire is a click when you want to bang. So that could be an ammunition malfunction, that could be a firearm malfunction. So you've got a click, no bang. On the range, if you're shooting, if you're practicing on the range, take your finger off the trigger, keep it pointed at the target, count to 30, and then you're going to extract that round. The reason being, a misfire could be a hang fire. And a hang fire is a click, pause, bang. And as I previously said, you can have 25, 30 seconds. It's unusual, but I've seen a video guy with a shotgun click, and this dumbass literally takes the shotgun, looks down the barrel, and it shoots the hat right off of his head. It was about a 4 or 5 second delay. So they are real. In a self-defense situation, tap, rack, get that round out of there. Even if it does fire, it's nothing more than a firecracker because it doesn't have the chamber that it needs to contain the pressure. So it's basically just a firecracker. A squib load is a little bit more dangerous in a self-defense situation because a squib load is a pop. It's less than normal recoil is a great way to put it. If I'm recoiling like this and then all of a sudden I recoil like that, I didn't suddenly just get stronger, right? So the danger is if that bullet is lodged in the barrel and I fire another round, where's that pressure going to go? So the bullet wants to follow the path of least resistance, which obviously is the open end of the muzzle. But if that's obstructed, it's all going to fly back at me. The gun could blow up in my hands. Self-defense situation, again, I can't tell you what to do. What I know on the range, stop shooting, disassemble the firearm, make sure that there's no obstruction in the barrel. On the range, there's no timeouts in a gunfight. Okay, so misfire, you can't count to 20, and a squib load, you can't disassemble your firearm. You've got to deal with that situation. As I said with the revolver, if I was in a self-defense situation, my life was on the line, I simply would press the trigger again. I can't tell you what to do because if it does blow up in your hands, I don't want it coming back to me saying, he told me to press the trigger. I'm giving you the information to make an educated decision for yourself. Some ranges prohibit steel because, generally speaking, a lot of, not all, but a lot of the steel cased ammunition will also have a bimetal bullet. So instead of lead on the inside, it'll have steel on the inside, or steel construction in that bullet. But the problem is that bullet then beats up their backstops really bad. So that's the reason why a lot of ranges, they don't want the metal bullet more so than the steel case. They don't want the steel bullet. The other thing is they do recycle that brass. Okay. And if they've got steel mixed in with the brass, they're selling that stuff by the pound. And if the recycler finds steel in the brass, they pay them less money per pound for the brass. So from that point of view, they're reselling your brass. And if there's steel in there, they're getting less money. So it's two reasons. One, steel bullets will damage backstops. Two, steel cases they can't resell. So again, misfire, you're in a self-defense situation, tap, rack, squib load, you've got to make a decision. Do you risk it? I know what I would do. You have to decide what you would do. So this shows the tap, rack, and roll. You're using gravity to kind of dump that round out. And a revolver is real simple. Just press the trigger again. That's the simplicity of the revolver. All right, so up until now, we've been talking specifically about handguns, and some of the information we discussed, like with rifles, does carry over, as far as ammunition goes. But we're going to now spend a few minutes talking about specifically home defense shotguns. So first off, guys, if you have ever heard, just rack the shotgun and they're going to go running for their life, I want to tell you that is complete manure. There is no difference in the sound of racking a shotgun versus racking a pistol. Okay, so if that's the sole reason is you want to scare them away, it doesn't matter if you have a shotgun or a pistol. I can tell you it's probably not going to scare them away. A shotgun is often recommended for home defense. It's great for like yard defense, but for home defense, I'm not so sure. Having that long barrel is not ideal for working inside of houses and having to move around doorways and things like that. It's not the end of the world, but it is something that you need to be aware of. Also, you do need to aim. Your pattern at 20 foot inside a house distance, the spread is only going to be a couple inches, depending on what type of round you're shooting. It's only going to be a couple inches, so you still need to aim. It's not just point and shoot. Now, don't get me wrong. A body's natural alignment with like a pistol out to 20 foot, you really don't need to focus on those sights. You want to just get a flash sight picture. But the same thing is true with that shotgun. You still want to get at least a flash sight picture. You're not just, pointing and it's taking out the whole room. That is not going to happen. At 20 or 30 yards, so we're talking like 60 feet, definitely your spread is going to be much larger. But at 20 feet, it's only going to be a few inches. When we talk about gauge of a shotgun round, we're talking about the size of the round, the diameter. So unlike the unit of measurement for bullets, which is caliber, shotguns are measured in gauge. The gauge of the barrel is equal to the number of solid spheres of lead, each having the same diameter as the barrel that would weigh a pound. For example, a solid sphere of lead weighing exactly 1/12 of a pound would fit perfectly into a 12 gauge barrel, and 1/20 would fit into a 20 gauge barrel. A 20 gauge barrel is smaller than a 12 gauge barrel. Okay, a 10 gauge barrel is larger than a 12 gauge barrel, so the numbers actually go down. 12 gauge is generally speaking the most common shotgun. 20 gauge certainly is a viable shotgun as well. And then we talk about the different types of rounds. You got 410, which is very small. I would not really consider that for home defense purposes. They do make 410 handguns. I wouldn't want to be shot with some of the rounds that they make, but it wouldn't be my first choice either. Shot size, that's the size of the BB or the pellet that's coming out of the barrel. So generally speaking, you'll have, for example, the number 12 shot or the 000. Big difference. Double aught, you're here at 0.33 versus 0.050. BB 0.18, which is kind of right in the middle. So shot size matters. There are many people that have been shot by bird shot. And it barely affected them. Sure, it hurt like hell. Sure, they've got BBs all over their body, a half inch, a quarter inch into their muscle, but it's not stopping the threat. It's not hitting those critical areas that we need to hit to stop the threat. So if we look at, for example, the double aught, the 00, that's basically the same size, almost the same size as like a 380 bullet. And when you're fitting that into a shotgun, you can get 6 shots in one trigger press, 6 380 in one trigger press. That is kind of the benefit of a shotgun. You see here we've got the BB shot, and you see here we've got the double aught. This has 8 pellets, this has 50 pellets. And then you see here we've got the slug, a 1 ounce slug. That's going to mess somebody's day up if you hit them, right? It's going to really, really make them regret their decisions. So that's something as well that is also viable. Plus you've got some range as far as with the double aught and the slug. You've got a little bit of range. When we're talking about chokes, that also determines the spread. The spread of the BBs or the buck as it's leaving your firearm. It's constricting. So it's either going to tighten or open up that pattern. So the choke does determine to some degree the accuracy of the shotgun. Police officers like shotguns to some degree if they're working within the house or close range distances. The typical load, the triple aught, will contain an equivalent of 6 380 ACP rounds, as we previously said. So if they hit someone with that, that's a great way to stop the threat. The AR-15 is also a great home defense firearm, especially for medium distances. The AR-15 is not an automatic rifle. AR does not mean automatic rifle. AR means armor light, which was the inventing company of the original AR-10 and then AR-15. So AR stands for Armalite, not automatic rifle. The AR-15 is not an M16. It's not what the military is using. It looks very similar, and in some degree, some of the parts are interchangeable, but the internal mechanisms are definitely not the same. It's not full auto. It's not burst. It's not a machine gun. The AR-15 is great because you've got good capacity. You've got good velocity on the bullet. You can add your lights if you want. So all of those things are great with the AR-15 platform. It's very light as far as rifles go. It's very comfortable to shoot, repeatable. Remember, we don't know how many rounds we need to stop the threat. So if we're dumping 3 rounds, it's very easy with that AR-15 to stay on target. Not nearly as easy with a shotgun shooting slugs to stay on target and shoot as rapidly as it is with the AR-15. Kind of look here what the AR-15 bullet can do to a watermelon. Watermelons are sometimes used to simulate a human skull. Obviously, not really a one-on-one comparison, but it does kind of give you an idea of what the round is capable of doing with this hydraulic media. The AR-15 round, you know, they talk about it being a high-powered round. The .223 actually is not a high-powered round. The .223 is not even allowed for deer hunting in some states because it's not considered powerful enough. So here's a round that's barely a hunting round, and the anti-gunner politicians are constantly after it. They want it banned. And this has nothing to do with the information that they spread to the uninitiated. It is not a high-powered round by any means. But it is good enough to get the job done, for sure. Home defense, it certainly is a great home defense firearm for, like, if you are in the country, for sure. Inside the house, again, long barrels, right? So you want maybe a short barrel AR-15 if that's what you're going to choose. Short barrel rifles do have additional restrictions and federal licensing that you need to look into. Also, keep in mind, a short barrel rifle, you lose velocity, and you have a louder concussion, more of a flash and a louder concussion. So .223 might not be the round for you. Maybe you want like a 300 Blackout or a 300 Whisper. Those are designed more to be shot out of short barrels. So just things to consider. Again, if you're going to use it for inside the home, short barrel is much more convenient. Too bad a lot of states don't allow suppressors. Illinois doesn't allow suppressors, but for home defense, you know, a suppressor would be a very, very good thing because you're not going to stop to have time to put on your hearing protection. If we look at the components on an AR, sorry about that. So we've got our muzzle attachment here, right? This could be a flash hider. This could be your suppressor. This could be a brake. The flash hider makes that flash a lot less bright, which is good for low light shooting, both for you as the shooter, as well as someone can't identify your location as easily. And again, a suppressor muffles the sound. It's just a muffler, nothing else. You've got this rail here, and there's many different types of rails available on the market, but this allows you to add things like lights and foregrips, and there's many different types of foregrips available on the market as well. But having that foregrip really allows you to pull that firearm into your shoulder and allows you to really tame that recoil and have fast follow-up shots. We've got our standard capacity magazine here. This is not a high capacity magazine. It is a standard capacity magazine. You can get anywhere from 5 all the way up to 100 rounds. Standard capacity is 30 rounds on the AR-15. You also have, of course, your receiver. The receiver is the firearm. You know, you can modify the internals on the AR-15. Again, I'm not a fan of modifying defensive firearms. You have here your pistol grip. Pistol grip is a great way with to modify the firearm to fit who you are. You can swap out that grip. You can get a larger grip. You can get a rubber grip, really easy to hold on to. You can get grips that change the angle, right? If that standard pistol grip angle is not comfortable for you, they have pistol grips that don't have quite as much of an angle. Butt stock, great way to tailor the size of the firearm to you, okay? What they call length of pull. So the distance from basically my shoulder to the trigger, I don't want it too far away and I don't want it too close. That allows me as an individual to collapse that stock either in or out, to tailor to my size, to fit who I am. The other nice thing is if someone else in your house might be using this firearm as well, let's say they're smaller than you, they can collapse that stock 1 or 2 points and be good to go. So the modularity of that firearm is really what makes it so popular. As I said before, let's see, there's got a question here. Thanks, Steve. Steve says, this is amazing. I think everyone should go through this 2-hour class regardless of experience. I think this will open up a lot of eyes to the amount of information that people like us who are legal gun owners try to do to protect ourselves properly. Absolutely. I mean, there's a science to everything, and there's a science to this. I believe everyone should get training. I think every firearm owner should get training, but what's very important is I think it should always be voluntary. I do not believe that training should ever be mandatory to exercise any of our rights, including the right to keep and bear arms. So I do wish more people were here. We've got 22 people, and that's awesome. That's great. I wish we had a few hundred, and we'll be doing more of these. Definitely more opportunities for people to learn. But there's a science to it. We want to stay out of trouble. We don't want anyone to hurt us. But if someone's going to try to hurt us, we want to stop that threat as quickly as possible. And that's really where the science comes into play. Scott says an AR pistol. An AR pistol is essentially a legal short barrel rifle. It's not a short barrel rifle because when we look at the definition, the legal definitions, it is not a rifle, it is a pistol due to some length issues and cosmetic criteria. But the AR pistol is a good option for home defense if you're considering, for example, the short barrel rifle, because you don't need specific federal licensing. There's some shortcomings to it as well. Sometimes it's not a stock, it's a brace. Sometimes the brace is not very comfortable. So like with anything, there's pros and cons, but it is something for home defense to consider. And certainly if you can put a suppressor on that, then it is a great home defense tool. Robert wants to know what's the difference between a 5.56 and a 2.23. They're almost identical. They're not identical, but they're almost identical. The 5.56 is going to have a slightly higher pressure than a 2.23. The 5.56 has a different head spacing. You can fire a 2.23 in a 5.56 chamber, and you can fire a 5.56 in a 2.23 chamber, but you're not supposed to. You really shouldn't. You'll cause damage to the firearm. 2.23 rifles generally are manufactured with tighter tolerances, more for target hunting or target shooting or hunting, where you only need 1 or 2 shots. Your life isn't on the line. 5.56 generally will be manufactured a little bit looser tolerances when reliability is more important than fractions of an inch on target. Right? If we're shooting for defensive accuracy and we're an inch here, or this is our point of aim, but this is our point of impact, okay, you're still going to do your job, right? 2.23 wild, WYLDE, is right in the middle. That allows you to shoot either 5.56 or 2.23. It's a little bit tighter than a 5.56, so you've got a little more accuracy, but you can shoot either 5.56 or 2.23. So again, just to summarize your question, what's the difference between 5.56 and 2.23? You can shoot 5.56 and 2.23 in a 5.56 chamber. You can only shoot 2.23 in a 2.23 chamber. And if you want the best of both worlds, find a 2.23 wild. And for AR-15s, there's 6.8, 6.5. There's, you can shoot 9mm. You can shoot just about any caliber that is around. We can do a whole webinar just on different calibers for the AR-15 and the pros and cons to all those different cartridges. So rather than get into the weeds on that, it's definitely something, if you're interested in an AR-15, to do the research on the different calibers that are available. Steve says, one more quick question. Thoughts on carrying a flashlight on a pistol versus carrying a high-powered flashlight separately regarding stopping a threat with a flashlight versus brandishing the firearm to show the light? I'm not against weapon-mounted lights, but I don't think that you should carry a weapon-mounted light unless you've gone through training with that weapon-mounted light. And the reason being, there's too strong of a desire to use that firearm like it's a flashlight if you have a weapon-mounted light. Now, there's absolutely techniques such as shining the flashlight that's on the weapon at the floor and using that to bounce off, shining it at the ceiling and using it to bounce off. So there's techniques so that you're not actually pointing your gun straight ahead of you. Also, momentarily on and off of the flashlight, not a steady on. That's going to be true with the weapon-mounted light as well as a handheld. You don't really want to be, searching with the light on. What you really don't want, think about this, okay? You don't want to hear a bump in your house. Grab your pistol, flick on that light, be wandering around your house, and you turn the corner and there's your kid at the kitchen, looking for something to drink in the middle of the night, and you just pointed a gun at your own child. That's what you do not want. So again, I'm not against weapon-mounted lights. I think they're an awesome tool, but I do think if you are going to get a weapon-mounted light, you should get training on it. We do have a defensive pistol, low-light defensive pistol, and we teach those techniques, target ID, movement, again, using the floor or the ceiling to bounce light. So we do teach those techniques, and I really, if you don't get training from us, if you are going to carry a weapon-mounted light, get training from someone competent. Having said that, also, I actually prefer, for me, I actually prefer a separate flashlight. A high lumen. I have a Surefire. There's a review on our website, alphaconcepts.com. You shine that thing in someone's eyes, they're blind, especially in a low light situation. You can create distance. You will catch them off guard. You will disorient them. And like I said, it's handheld. There's a review on our website, so that's my personal preference. All right, so other use of force options. A flashlight is one. Taser, pepper spray. The man who only has a hammer thinks every problem is a nail. Not every situation warrants the use of deadly force. So it's nice to have a tool. Firearms are tools. Flashlights are tools. Pepper spray is a tool. It's nice to have a tool other than a lethal tool. So you kind of want to look at your scenario, what's legal in your area, where you live and travel, and decide. Impact weapons, like a baton is also another great tool. Now that's what we call less lethal, not non-lethal, because you hit someone in the head with a baton, they could die. You taser or stun gun someone, they could die. It's less likely than shooting them that they'll die, but it's always possible. So less lethal is definitely the proper terminology. When considering these less lethal options, it's important to remember that while a firearm can have a disabling or deterrent effect out of the dozens of feet, their other devices will require you to be within 10 to 15 feet of the attacker. For a taser or pepper spray, that's certainly true, right? It's not going to go very far. Also, taser shoots out two prongs, but a stun gun, you're right up close. They're on you. So those are things that you want to think about. The taser, as we said, it's got the two prongs. It's got two hidden prongs in here, and I'm not sure why it didn't work. There we go. And when you press that trigger, it's going to shoot out. What it's also shooting out here is it leaves behind these little signature they're little discs and they have serial numbers stamped into them, so it makes it easier for law enforcement when they're doing an investigation to know who discharged their taser. The other thing is some models of taser will have backup probes so that even these probes, let's say these barbs don't hit their intended target, though some tasers will have, so you can have a regular, just a standard stun gun. No range whatsoever. You got to be up close. This is one type of pepper spray. If you're interested in pepper spray, one that I prefer is a Saber 3-in-1. It's got the gelatin and the dye, and the gel tends to stick, and also it's got 3-in-1. So gelatin, dye, and I believe foam. So you kind of get the best of all worlds on your target. There's Great Palm, someone recommended to me that I'm looking into. So you want to kind of look, if you're looking at pepper spray, you kind of want to look at the different options that are available. So the active ingredient in pepper is capsaicin. Sorry, and that's what makes the pepper hot. And so basically they take out that chemical from the pepper and they mix it with other chemicals, and they put it into some kind of tool or spray bottle that will discharge. And this is a great less lethal. Now, there are some people that, can work through the pain of pepper spray, but they're few and far between. It's going to make it harder for them to breathe. It's going to make them want to shut their eyes. They're going to be, nose dripping, mouth watering. So pepper spray allows you to spray them and run away, get away, call the police. We covered the universal safety rules. We covered how to clear a handgun. We understand the handgun's action, how it actually worked. Understanding revolvers, how they actually worked, understanding semi-automatics, the difference between a semi-automatic and a revolver, how to deal with malfunctions. We talked a little bit about home defense shotguns and AR15 home defense rifles, and other use of force options. Does anyone have any questions? I want to thank you all for the thank yous, by the way. Yes, Steve, I have been sprayed with pepper spray by a friend when I was a teenager, and it is not an enjoyable experience. I've also been stun gunned many times, also as a teenager, and sometimes I'll do it in class just to prove a point. And I can tell you something, I would rather get stun gunned than pepper sprayed. It's a whole different world. Confetti, yes, Mark. I was calling them discs. It's confetti, those little bits in the taser. Happy birthday to your friend Dixon Sider. Happy birthday, Dixon. From Gustavo Ramirez. Thank you, Chad. I'm glad you enjoyed the class. This will be going on YouTube, so you guys can watch anytime. I also want you guys to stop back next week. We're going to be doing lethal force, when it is and is not justifiable to use your firearm. We're going to be talking about generic. Okay, we're not going to be talking specifically about any state, 50 states. We've got people from all over the nation tuned in. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to be talking about generic legal theories that'll keep you out of trouble, so that when you actually are using the firearm, it's the last resort and you're less likely to get charged with any sort of crimes. We're also going to have the following week, so next week is going to be lethal force. The following week we're going to be doing an informal instructor Q&A. The goal is to do a webinar every single week, one evening a week. Following that informal Q&A, we're going to be doing another USCCA mini class, which is two of them. We're going to be doing about stopping the mass shooter. So the first one talks about all the statistics about where mass shootings occur, what type of firearms they're using, that sort of thing. And then the second one will be talking about actually how to combat mass shootings. So that'll be a two-part series that definitely you guys don't want to miss. Steve, follow us on, let me see, last time I jumped on, let me see if I could post a link without screwing up the audio again. Bear with me. All right. Unfortunately, if I post the audio again, it's going to start giving me the double audio. But Alpha Concepts, spelled with a K. You can see it in the bottom corner right here. Alpha Concepts. You can go to alphaconcepts.com. You can go to facebook.com/alphaconcepts. You can go to the YouTube channel. Basically, just go to your favorite search engine, type in Alpha Concepts, and we're everywhere. We're on all social media. Facebook is the primary one that we use currently. I know Facebook's not gun friendly, but that's where we built up our following, and we are on everything. So no matter where you're at, definitely follow us. And if there's somewhere you're at and we're not, then recommend it, and I'll be sure. Michael Leiden referred you, Steve. Yeah, Michael and I are going to be putting a defensive pistol class together in May. I invite any of you guys in the Illinois area to come by. We're going to be doing Defensive Shooting Fundamentals Level 1. And that'll be going in May. All right, so obviously I fell for something. It's late. You guys got to give me thoughts on USCCA. Steve, I'm going to be doing a podcast. I do a weekly podcast. I'm going to be doing a weekly podcast. I'm going to be doing an episode specifically devoted to the USCCA. Michael Leiden, who I previously mentioned, your friend, is, as you may know, employed by the United States Concealed Carry Association. He's going to be a guest on my podcast. We're filming it next week. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the USCCA. Obviously, him being an employee, he's probably not going to want to talk about the cons, but like anything, there are some. And he's going to address them. I already told him I don't want this to be a commercial for the USCCA. I want to have an honest conversation. I'm a USCCA certified instructor. I'm a USCCA partner. They are one of the better companies out there. I think everybody should have some self-defense insurance. And I think that everybody, like the firearm, everyone has a different criteria for what kind of firearm they want. I think that the USCCA is definitely a viable option, and you have to look at the policies for the companies. You have to look at what is and is not covered to make sure that it fits your lifestyle. But I have referred students to the USCCA with good, clear conscience. As I said, I'm an instructor and I'm a partner. I'm just telling you up front that what you need to do, what anyone watching this needs to do, is check the policies. And keep in mind, policies do change. The USCCA just had a pretty major improvements and changes a few months ago, probably about six months ago, roughly. And so policies in all of the providers do change from time to time. I used to keep a guide with all of those comparisons, and every 6 months I was updating it. It was just a huge time suck. So basically, I'm just going to tell you, read the policy, and I, with good conscience, have referred people to USCCA, and will continue to do so until and unless they make a change that I don't agree with, but that hasn't happened yet. Any other questions, guys? Like I said, follow us on social media, alphaconcepts.com. We're going to be doing more of these webinars every week. The podcast, you can go stevealphaconcepts.com/podcast. We're on every platform. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. We're on all the platforms with the podcast. But the easiest way is alphaconcepts.com/podcast. It has all the links there. And like I said, the webinar is going to be weekly. This is the first one we're doing. Other than a few technical problems, it turned out pretty well. And of course, the troll name that I fell for. But whatever, it's fun. It's fun. I'll talk about guns all day, and if we can joke, it makes it even more fun. So let me just do this. Switch screens there, right? That's a little bit better. That's a little better. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. If nobody has any other questions, like I said, this will be posted on YouTube. And, you can come back and revisit anytime. And I hope to see all of you guys in the future podcasts. Future webinars. Not podcasts, they're webinars.